We are finally getting down now after a breakfast that I'm not used to. I've been pretty flat, but like I've been stuck at like 130 for like the past 2 hours. I keep giving myself an increased basal and everything. I think I'm just struggling with right before my period. It's okay, we're gonna get through it. The blood sugars could be worse. I'm trending down now, so now I'll be able to eat. I'm gonna talk today about diabetes and diet. So before I rattle on any more about my blood sugars, let's get right into today's video. Hey everyone, it's Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. And as you can tell by the title of today's video, I'm going to sit down and tell you my wholehearted perspective on type 1 diabetes and diet. Now, you're all not probably going to agree with everything I say, and that's okay, but I promised that I would sit down and just share my perspective on diet and diabetes and all different things. And I hope to eventually be taking you guys out on different like restaurants or fast food joints, different places that you might go out and eat, and kind of how I tackle eating foods at restaurants that may or may not be difficult, and kind of what I do to safeguard my blood sugars as much as possible. So, look forward to those when those come out, but I wanted to sit down and talk about this today. So first of all, type 1 diabetics, you're not at fault for your diabetes, meaning that nothing you ate caused your body to mistakenly attack your own beta cells. So that is the first thing I tell anybody is like, I can have anything I want. But my second response is, as long as I know how to appropriately cover for it. And usually my third response after that is, but instead, most of the time I do choose to eat foods that are blood sugar safe because it does make management easy. Food is one of the biggest impactors on blood sugar. Obviously, most foods contain carbohydrates, which then in turn get broken down into glucose by your body, which then in turn enters the bloodstream. And then therefore, you need insulin to drive that sugar from the bloodstream into the cells so that it can be properly used for energy. So my perspective, first off, on diabetes is that I'm going to have anything and everything that I want as long as I know how to appropriately attack it, if that makes sense. So say I wanted something high glycemic. I'm going to attack it. First of all, I'm going to want to know how many carbs are in that meal or in that dessert. And the second thing I want to go to look at is putting into place some non-traditional or a little bit more heavier techniques to ensure that there's insulin in my body present first before the food gets digested. Because if you don't implement things like pre-bolusing or maybe even a temp basal or some activity or balancing your meal, you're going to have a hard time controlling your blood sugar. And it's all about compensation is what I'm going to lead into next. So if I want something high glycemic, I make sure that the rest of my meal is fairly low glycemic. For example, if I want a huge piece of cake at my lunch, there's nothing wrong with eating cake. And if I want a large piece that's 40 to 50 carbs, I'm going to eat that cake. But in turn, I make sure the rest of my meal is low glycemic. It might be a salad, or some protein, or something that isn't really going to impact my blood sugar, so that all I'm focused on is having my body being able to metabolize that cake, and everything else is easy and gentle to work with for blood sugar. So I usually would pre-bolus, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how I'm doing in the moment, or if I'm going through PMS, I might pre-bolus longer. And I may put a temp basal in the background, things like rice and yogurts and granola bars. For me in particular, I need a temp basal in addition to my bolus in order to keep my blood sugars not from skyrocketing. So once you learn kind of how different foods impact your blood sugar, you can do anything and everything you want. When I was first diagnosed, however, I did find it easier to stick to a certain amount of carbs per meal or really stay on the lower side of the glycemic index, just because it was safer while I was learning how to manipulate my insulin doses. Because if you think about it, the lower the carb, the less insulin you have to take, which means the less risk of your blood sugar looking like a roller coaster. Your standard deviation is going to be lower. You're not going to have as big of a swing. There isn't going to be as much of a risk for low blood sugar. As much as I do preach, though, that you can have anything and everything you want, I still like to incorporate a lot of low glycemic foods. What's low glycemic foods? These are foods that really do not harm your blood sugar, or they have a very minimal impact on your blood sugar. So things that are like proteins, like chicken and fish and venison, anything that's meat is going to have protein, but there's really going to be no carbohydrate. Now, do keep in mind, if you have a very heavy protein meal and you do not have a lot of carbohydrate, the protein still will get converted to sugar, but it will get converted slowly. And I hope to show you kind of how I bolus for a heavy protein meal that I don't want to have a lot of carbs at. I typically take a small dose of Humalog after the meal, or I may take a small dose of Humalog before, but then I don't have to pre-bolus because of the digestion of the protein. So things that are, like I said, are protein-based, like meats, non-starchy vegetables, you're talking spinaches, lettuces, asparagus is another great example, cucumbers. Most dairy products or fat products are usually low in carb too, like sour creams, cheeses, avocados are a great example. Mustards, ketchup, condiments, and fattier types of foods are going to be low on the glycemic index too. But careful with ketchup. Ketchup does have some sugar, but it is on the lower side. Especially if you, like me, you don't eat a lot of ketchup, it's not really going to impact your blood sugar. But if you eat it by the tablespoon or by the cupful, then yes, please account for your carbs, because tomatoes do contain sugar. So stick to a lot of proteins, a lot of lean, non-starchy vegetables. Anything of that nature is really going to not impact your blood sugar a lot. Incorporate a lot of those in your diet, and I definitely do this. The easiest way to get them is through salads. Put them on sandwiches, because sandwiches mainly are composed of meats, and the middle part is all really safe for your blood sugar, but it's just the bread that's not going to make a difference. So then once you figure out what your non-carby foods are going to be, then that's when I start thinking and choosing, what do I want in my meal for carbs? Do I want some fruit? Do I want starches? Do I want, some sort of sweeter dessert, if that's the case? So things like rice, potatoes, beans, breads, those are starchy, be aware of those, but do keep in mind that those you can find lower carb options that are like whole wheat. There's even some that are more fibrous based, where like most of the carbs come from fiber, so you can actually like subtract half of that off. Fruits are very high in sugar. Be mindful of your fruits, but the best fruits I find that are easy on my blood sugar are berries, apples, cherries. Those tend to not bother my blood sugar as much, but things like bananas and oranges I try to avoid, or if I eat them, I'm very mindful of how much of them I'm eating, because for me, they're very high glycemic. Keep in mind, everybody's going to respond to different things differently. You may respond horribly to ice cream, but cake you do fine with once you bolus for it. Whereas for me, actually, ice cream is one of the safer treats I can eat, because my body seems to metabolize ice cream really well. But again, you need to understand too that everybody's body is going to be different, and if you're finding the high carb foods that work for you, stick with them, because they will give you energy, you can enjoy them, and you can really not worry that, hey, I know how to bolus for this, and let's go forward from there. So I believe in having a well-balanced diet, and as a diabetic particularly, even though it's not our fault that our diet induced it, as a type 1, I still find it important that you incorporate a lot of low glycemic foods. So keep that in mind when you're eating, because it can make a difference on your blood sugars. And I think that's part of the reason why I've had decent control, not only because of me watching my blood sugars closely, but me understanding that, hey, rice is a big blood sugar spiker. This salad is going to be basically nothing. This fruit is going to raise my blood sugar, but this cucumber won't. It's understanding the nutrients behind different things. And if you have to look things up, look things up. You're better off taking a more of an educated guess about carbs than just randomly going, oh, I think it's 45. You can start that way, but then I'm going to start researching and going, okay, how many carbs are in this ingredient? How many carbs are in that ingredient? And then I'll give a decent guess. And if I miss, I'd be bold with insulin and go, okay, I obviously missed. My blood sugar's headed up quick. Let's dose again before that 140 turns into a 300. Or whatever the case may be for you on your Dexcom. And I don't think I would truly understand the role of nutrition and diet in diabetes without having a Dexcom, because then you can clearly see what foods impact your blood sugar the most. I hear some of you guys have a hard time with peanut butter spiking your blood sugar. It doesn't really spike mine, so for me that's more of a safe food. Some of you may have less of a problem with yogurt. I find when I eat yogurt, I have a huge problem with it. It does spike my blood sugar no matter how low of a sugar I eat of a yogurt, no matter what time of the day I eat, what time of the month I eat, it doesn't make a difference. So then, if I want to enjoy foods that my body can't handle, I put a different plan into place. I may bolus more up front. I may pre-bolus longer. I may put a temp basal in the background to kind of hinder that spike from going too high, if that makes sense. So it's very important that you understand the glycemic index, but it's also very important to know that if you want something, don't hesitate to eat it and don't feel limited, because when you start feeling limited, that can turn into a negative mental thought that sits in your head that I can't have this and that my life's over. No, it's not. I eat a lot of heavy carb stuff, you guys. I eat Mexican food. I eat rice. I eat yogurt. I eat granola bars. I eat ice cream. I eat potatoes, for goodness sakes. I eat bread. But it's knowing how it affects your blood sugar is the key, and the compensation part. If I choose to have potatoes at my meal, I'm not going to have dessert too. Or if I want a little bit of each, like say at like an Easter gathering or a Christmas gathering, I'll take a little, I'll fill up really much, like a lot on the heavier meat and the vegetable stuff, but I'll take little bits and pieces of like a little scoop of potatoes, a little scoop of dessert, a little scoop of jello, a little piece of bread. You know, I'll kind of nibble a little bit, and I find that's easier to control than having big portions of different heavier carb foods. So, yeah, that's kind of my perspective on diet and diabetes. It's pretty wholeheartedly basic, but I don't think you have to eliminate foods that you love. But before you try to master the heavier carb stuff, start looking at the lower carb stuff first, and once you figure out how your body responds to the lower carb stuff, then start increasing it. Okay, and a good example of this would be like, you know, if you want to start with a starchy food, start with bread. Once you learn how to master bread, move on to potatoes. Once you learn how to master potatoes, move on to rice. If you get the point here, don't try to do it all at once. Like, pick a main thing and then go from there. But I do also believe this too, that the lower the carb you eat, the less impact it has on your blood sugar, and the less roller coastery your blood sugars are going to look. And then obviously the lower carb foods require less insulin, meaning there's less risk on your blood sugar. So if you're not taking a lot, it's the law of small numbers from Dr. Bernstein, you guys. If you take a set amount of carbs, say like 30 carbs, that's lower than 60, and you're going to need a lot less insulin. And if you're putting a lot less insulin in your body, that means your risk of high blood sugar is decreased because of the amount of carbs, but also your risk of low blood sugar is decreased because you don't have so much insulin working against you. So I take a perspective of both sides, understanding that low glycemic foods and the law of small numbers really does work. But if you really want to eat certain things at a meal, go for it. And like I said, I hope to be taking you guys on a journey with me through fast foods, buffets, and I want to show you how I kind of look at things and perceive things. And maybe I'll do a day in the life again. I hope to do a day in the life again. Or maybe I'll just show you what I eat and how I'm thinking about what I'm eating as I'm making the meal. If that makes sense, how I kind of look at the carb count, how I kind of look at balance and compensation, if that makes sense. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. Feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. I post videos every single week about diabetes plus more. And stay tuned for more videos coming out. I have a bonus video coming out on the Diabetic Health Journal, my endo appointment, how that went. My new A1C, which a lot of you probably do know unless you follow me on Beyond Type 1. My A1C is 5.9 now, which is basically the same as last time. So I'm very, very pleased with that despite all the high blood sugars I went through. Again, I'll talk about that later. And until next time for another video, take care, God bless, be kind, spread positivity, and be thankful. Bye, everyone.